Welcome back to What's Happening. I almost said Open News. We're here with Miss Sherry Gibbs, who's an osteoarchaeologist, and she's been pinpointing some details about, of course, the course that will be offered at the Galen University. I was going to say University of Belize. Man, what's wrong? Too much pizza. Pepper's Pizza. Buy it. Pepper's Pizza. Okay. So we're going to be showing some pictures now. And you're going to basically tell us what's taking place in those pics, right? Thank you. Oh, but before that, we have a caller. So we'll just go to that.
Good night. What's happening? Hello? Okay.
Guess we missed that call. But we do have a question here from one of our viewers, and it says, how do you apply to do the course and who to contact?
You can call the school or check out the school's website, but probably easier if you're in the country to call 824-3226. And Miss Elida or Miss Juanita will answer the phone, and you can just tell them you're interested in applying for the forensic anthropology course in the summer, and they'll direct you either to Miss Rondine or Kendra. So
okay,
pretty easy.
Great. Okay, now we're gonna move right ahead with the photos.
Yeah, this image is just, it's a mock crime scene that was set up, and it's just showing some of the students excavating this, this crime scene. And there again. So again, it's a mock crime scene, and these are actually some police officers. The forensic anthropologist David Glassman, when he was living in Texas, used to do these little courses for the, I think it was the Houston Police Department. And he would do a week-long forensic anthropology class for them, and he would set up the crime scene.
Bones?
No, no,
okay.
no. It's they're plastic skeletons, the same which this skeleton here, and we have another one at the school.
And you say with the use of the skeleton, you can identify the sex, the age, the stature, ancestry, analyze trauma and disease. Could you tell us about that, how you go about analyzing the skeleton?
We'll first want to try to figure out the age of the individual. We're looking at with the age, you can get a more accurate age estimate from a young skeleton, up to about the age of 19 or 20 years old. Okay. And we look at, with a young individual, we'll look at the dentition. And so, you know, we'll look at the teeth. Okay. You know, if they're young kids, they still will have their milk teeth, but then they start to fall out, and then they'll get their permanent teeth. And we can look at the rate of eruption, and we can get within a good few months. There is some variation, but we can get a little bit more precise with a younger individual looking at dental eruption. We'll also look at the ends of the long bones. When you're born, you're not born with a perfect little mini femur that just grows. It's in pieces. And then as you get older, these pieces will continue to grow, and then they fuse together. So we'll look at these little epiphyses, or the little end parts of the long bones, again, to get an idea of how old the individual is. Then we'll look at sex. We don't try to sex a skeleton until they're, you know, until it's an adult skeleton. We know that the individual is an adult, then we can safely sex the individual, whether they're male or female. And for obvious reasons, we'll use the pelvis first. Females, their pelvis are more bowl-shaped, a little bit wider, to allow for the birthing process. From there, we'll look at the skull. And males just tend to be larger and more robust than females on average. So the bones of males tend to be a little bit larger and show more muscle markings. So those are some of the things that we'll look at for sexing the individual. Then stature, we'll measure the long bones, and there are a number of formulas that have been established where we can, you know, enter the length of the long bones, and it'll give us an estimate as to how tall the person was. Then we'll look at the health of the individual. So we can look at the teeth. You know, the person had a lot of cavities, how healthy their teeth were, if there were teeth missing. The Dentition is extremely useful in forensic work because many people go to the dentist, and in North America or in Europe, there's a lot of dental records. In Belize, if you go to a regular dentist, that individual might, remember somebody and, know if they've had to do a lot of fillings or if they had to do a lot of caps or bridge work or pull a lot of teeth out. So that information is useful. We look at the trauma that the individual has had during their life, so not necessarily at the time of death, but maybe when they were a kid they broke some bones, or maybe they played some sports or fell off a bike. So we can look for healed fractures, and family members will remember if someone who's gone missing had some broken bones. Hip replacements, it's a fairly common thing, especially in North America and Europe, and those sometimes come with serial numbers. So it's pretty easy to track who the individual was if you've got that. Or if you've broken a bone and you've had plates put in, that's something else that's extremely useful to look for.
Okay. So how would you determine the ethnicity and stuff like that?
Ethnicity? We would look at the shape of the nose, the opening of the nose up there, the width and the breadth of it. So there are differences. It's kind of a tough subject to get into.
Okay.
Africans tend to have a broader nasal aperture than Europeans. We'll look at the shape of the skull. We'll also look at stature.
Okay.
And like what about like people that are multiracial? How would you determine that?
It just gets really difficult.
Because I was thinking, whoa.
Yeah, what about us?
It makes it getting weird.
How would you tell us?
But you can sometimes also determine handedness, whether the person was left-handed or right-handed. And again, the muscle attachments on the bone, if there's a lot of pull, you can sometimes tell if the person was left or right-handed.
Okay. Can you tell about the disease you said, right? How would you tell?
Certain diseases do manifest on bone. Tuberculosis.
Like diabetes?
Not so much diabetes, tuberculosis, because it's becoming fairly common in Belize. If it's left long enough, lesions will start to show up on the ribs and the spine, and then it'll spread to the rest of the body. Syphilis is something else that, if left long enough, will start to show up. But vitamin D deficiency, vitamin C deficiencies, so nutritional problems. We can tell if an individual had any stresses when they were young when we look at their permanent teeth. So weaning is something that's been looked at, and it's thought that during the time of weaning, the infant goes under a lot of stress, psychological stress, but sometimes nutritional stress, because they're not getting that nutrition from their moms anymore, and depending on what their diet's been shifted to, they might be losing a lot. And we'll see these lines on their teeth. And sometimes you can tell if an individual had a pretty stressful childhood by looking at the lines on their permanent teeth.
What about ancestry?
Yeah, that's kind of going around
The same thing.
similar to what we had talked about before, yeah.
Okay. Right.
Okay, so getting back to the questions, how significant is forensic anthropology in helping to solve a crime, or how could it be applied in Belize?
It's, I think, being recognized more and more as being extremely useful. And, in the situations when you've got skeletal remains or really badly decomposed remains, when you just can't make an identification on the individual if, the face is too decomposed. Sometimes you can't even tell if the individual is male or female, or, if they're light-skinned or dark-skinned. Then, those are one of those cases where, if you don't like dissecting, maybe you might get pretty squeamish. That might be a time when you're dealing with soft tissue. But in cases where there's skeletal remains, or as I mentioned earlier, mass disasters, then a forensic anthropologist can be extremely useful, and I think it's being recognized more and more. But also in crime scene recovery, because really they're usually trained, it's archaeological field methods, scientific methods that are used to collect the remains and any of the any information that's going to tell you, maybe who the murderer was or who this individual was. So you want to try to collect as much as possible. In Belize,